John, are you all healed?
All healed.
Well,
Healed at you? What?
you fell.
I had a broken ankle.
Yeah.
That was back in January.
I know.
I'm no, I'm not. I don't heal that slowly. I may be old, but you know. No, I was you know, getting around in March.
Well, you were getting around, but I just wondered if you're all, that's the past, obviously. That's good.
No, the funny thing, my ankle used to bother me, you know, and if I stood a certain way for too long, you know, and after I broke it, it doesn't do that anymore. It just, but it hurts in a different way.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll reconvene. We're now at consent items. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So now that brings us to business items, which would be, oh, and before we get into the business items, are there any announcements that we need to make from closed session? I'll turn it over to our attorney.
No, Mr. Chairman, there's no reportable action.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt the flow here, but now let's get on to the business items, is the operating budget for our next fiscal year. Mr. Hickox.
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, Al Burrell was going to present this item since he prepared the report. I went to look for him in his office, and his office was dark. I can get started if you like, but I didn't prepare the report entirely.
Well, I certainly have no objection, unless the rest of the members do, is simply move into item B. We'll postpone item A. And then I'm assuming you're handling both B and C. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if that's okay with the board, we'll let you proceed.
All right, thank you.
Are we still on 5?
No, yeah,
Five
we're on
B.
5, but we're
5B.
postponing A until we have Al Burrell, the finance director.
So thank you, Chair. Moving forward with item 5B is the brackish water reclamation demonstration report. The facility still continues to operate in membrane bypass mode, which means no membrane treatment is being conducted. However, we still are operating the facility with the booster pumps, the chemical injection system, analytical equipment, and monitoring all water quality and performing all maintenance duties. Currently, for this reporting period, we had a 75-25 split between United and Cayugas water supplies, respectively. And the silt density index still remains high at 4.1 for this reporting period, which means that the facility will still continue to be operated in bypass. Looking at the numbers moving forward in our water supply, I don't see any water shortage as a result of the current conditions related to drought. That's a good thing. And our, for now, our next board meeting is scheduled for November 20th at 4 p.m. So if there's any questions regarding this report, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions on the board? This is B.
Okay, good. I'm quiet.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to offer questions? Okay, so with that, this is simply a file for information. Okay, so, all right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that brings us now to C.
Thank you. Again, this is a Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency update related to the GSP. This basically is explaining that the consultant was asking for some more time. The GMA required them to produce the draft document in January, so they're going to be working on that time frame. The GSP will replace the emergency ordinance that we're currently in, just so everybody's aware that the new reduction or demand allocation will be changing once the GSP is implemented. The technical advisory group continues to meet on a monthly basis. Attached for this report is their update to the GMA board. There's not a whole lot of activity other than what they're going over, such as the maps and hydraulic water movement, all the technical stuff. DUDEC has been working with agency staff, and they are planning on holding 2 public workshops. One of them, I believe, has already been held. What's today's date? In fact, both of those meetings probably have already been held. The actions within the GMA is moving quite rapidly now with the development of the GSP in its final push and stages. I apologize for not having this to you when it first came out. But as far as I know, there's been no significant information. It was just a public involvement period for people to comment on the development of the GSP. So with that, if there's any further questions, that concludes my report.
Questions of the board? Just a continuing mantra here of our environmental issues and why environmental protection, I'll call it EP, isn't included with M&I and Ag, because it will ultimately affect indirectly safe yield. And is that the cows are out of the barn and it's too late to even consider that as a category of consideration in safe yield calculations and withdrawals?
I'm not certain that it's too late. I can always inquire on that fact and see if there's been any discussion at within the TAG group, and see if that's available.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of got the impression that there is some sympathy in Washington over this dilemma. And if we're going to be squeezing M&I and Ag, shouldn't the environmental community be part of that squeeze? Enough said. This is, I'm repeating myself from previous meetings, but if it's not too late to carve that out as a part of this equation, I certainly would urge that to happen.
All right, I'll follow up on that.
Is that acceptable to, I don't want to just unilaterally say it, but. Okay, so I think at that point, since this was a file, accept and file, if we hear a motion.
Second.
All approve, please? Aye. Okay, so now that brings us back to the main item, 5A. Mr. Burrell.
Thank you. I was going to say mayor, but this is PHWA board meeting.
Chair.
Chair of the board and the other board members. We're recommending that the board review and adopt the proposed fiscal year 2017-18 PHWA operating budget. Some background and analysis. In summary, the fiscal year 2017-18 PHWA budget has been developed to include $100,000 of professional services and water consultant fees. The land lease from Oxnard is estimated at $85,000, and the fund annual off-aqueduct charges of $250,000. The proposed 17-18 PHWA operating cost budget is $5 million. Or 10.71% less than fiscal year 2016-17 operating expenses. The major decrease in cost is the purchase of water, which was approximately $807,000. This budget also includes a take-or-pay surcharge of approximately $203,000 issued by United Water Conservation District for fiscal year 16-17. Attached to this budget is the proposed fixed and variable rate models and PHWA water usage for fiscal years 15, 16, and 16, 17. With that, if you have any questions, I'll entertain your questions.
Start at your end, please.
I can't see you, but I know you're there. I need to have a stool to sit on. Okay. Everybody's budget is done a little bit differently, and I'm not the greatest person. However, I've had several that I've been used to. And the one that that hit me as I was looking through this was that on page 10, under expenses, and we got to, and the water plant expenses, FD 443.
I think this might be better. We can see each other.
Oh, thank you. It has to do with the water plant expenses for the actual 15 to 16, 2015 to 16. It's on the first column.
Correct.
It says 938,422. Okay. However, on the next page, 11, even though the proposed 17-18 is still 1149,849, and they're on both sides, it has here for the 15-16, 938,055. Why would there be a difference?
There shouldn't be. Should be the same.
But it's not.
It's not. It's a slight difference, and I would have to look into it to see why it was different. Maybe it may be a copying error, but the actuals were the 938,422.
Right, because this was done 15-16, and the number should be the same, right?
It should be the same.
Right. Okay.
I can look into it for you to see
I-
why there was
well-
that small difference.
Let the president know, and he'll email.
Will do.
No problem. Thank
Okay.
you.
For my benefit, I'm trying to track what you were saying. I have it on page 10, but I'm trying to find it on
Okay.
page 11.
On page 11, it's on the bottom, the first column,
Right, actual.
right? And it says 938,055, and it actually should be the same as it is on page 10. Or, one is 422 and one is 055. Now, that's not that.
Oh, I
right.
understand.
It's not that,
It's the
Big
grand
thing.
total under actual. I was
Right.
looking for the line item that related to the plan.
but if you look at the proposed 17-18, they're both the same. It's 1149,849
Understood.
on both sides. So something is a little off somewhere.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry.
Please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Burrell, I have a question on your staff report. See, you identify that we have a take-or-pay surcharge of $202,000.
Correct.
Is there, so this is a question, two-part. Could we avoid paying that, and could we store that water that, we haven't been taking? Could we store it somewhere to then avoid the 2002? It's like we're being penalized for not taking our share, but if we take our share.
That's a technical question.
Okay.
So I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Hickox.
Okay.
Yes, those fees are being imposed due to the take-or-pay provision of the agreement. Again, we're trying to negotiate the removal of that provision within the agreement. However, because the agreement wasn't signed with new language by the time fiscal year 16-17 ended, then it is still active. As far as taking that amount of water, that is 660 acre-feet of water. That's a significant amount of water. There is no storage capacity above ground or below ground except for the basin, and that's where we would be pumping it from. So it's already in the basin, and we didn't take it. So the problem is the penalty of the take-or-pay penalty. That's really becoming the issue. If in the future we run into a situation like this, the new language within the agreement would allow us to share that allocation that we didn't take with a neighboring agency that could take it and use it, and then they would pay for the extraction on our behalf, and the allocation would still come to us. So we wouldn't lose any of that allocation value, nor would we have to pay the penalty. So that's one of the benefits of the new language provisions that we're trying to get implemented.
Okay, very good, thank you.
No, please.
Okay, I'm just curious, the 100,000 for professional services, water consultant fees, we've had questions about that. Is that just a guesstimate? And who are you anticipating at this point would be the consultant?
Yes, ma'am. That right now is just a holder. It's a dollar value. There is no consultant identified or a project or topic for which they would be employed to do. We just anticipate that a water consultant would be, may be required during this fiscal year, and that money was set for that provision. If no consultant is needed, then that money would be reversed in the true-up process at the end of the fiscal year.
Right, thank you. And on the 85,000 to Oxnard, what is that for specifically? I haven't looked through the budget. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to get through all of it.
That is potential for land lease fees
For the plant?
for the plant,
That's what I wanted to clarify.
which again is under discussion with the city of Oxnard, so that hasn't been determined yet.
Right, and how did you come to the $85,000 figure?
Based on previous discussions with the now former Public Works Director with the city of Oxnard, and through the city of Port Hueneme, the two Public Works Directors had conversations related to that dollar value.
I won't ask any more questions.
Could my follow-on question in that regard is, for like a weather report, is the confidence level at 80% or?
You know, if the weatherman says 20%, it's going to rain.
Yeah, perhaps the weather report could be delayed to the next meeting.
Thank you.
I will say though, just on the land lease amount, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that 85,000 was based on some kind of market study that was done by one or both of the agencies. So it wasn't just pulled out of air. There was an attempt to do some kind of market analysis of what that land would be worth on a lease basis.
That is correct.
Justified fair market.
Yes.
Okay, so the comments and questions I have is that one of our members already brought to our attention the increased budget allocation for contract services, although it falls under city attorney as well, so I'm not really sure if that's, you're anticipating litigation and that's what that allocation's for, or if it's really for a consultant to assist in our negotiations.
That was for a water attorney, a special legal counsel for water issues. If the agency needed to get representation of a legal counsel for water issues, those funds were put into the budget.
Okay. I think that there's been some sensitivity expressed by this board in the past about individual water consultants, not necessarily attorneys, legal counsel. It would seem to me that before any kind of contract is entered into for that kind of scope of work, this board ought to have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
Certainly, none of these two in question have any assignment at this point. It's just a holder on the budget. If one of those or two of those need to be implemented, it would certainly be brought back to this board for approval, and a full scope of work would be identified and approved.
Okay, great. I did notice a kind of interesting spike in utility costs that you're anticipating. Is there a reason for that? Is there something that I'm missing?
The pumping cost could vary, And if we do run into a water quality scenario where we're able to run this winter because of good diversion practices and the silt density index is lowered, there's a potential for the plant to come back online.
Oh, okay, so that's a lead into my next question, is that when you put together the budget, what is your anticipation for bypass versus online?
It's a little bit of both, because we really don't have a crystal ball to determine which way or the other. One of the benefits of the true-up at the end of the year allows us, to a certain degree, to project what those costs will be, and if we're a little off, there's a true-up that'll basically do that at the end of the year.
Well, I noticed in your report you talk about, a not necessarily sizable, but notable decrease in our available rates for per acre foot charges. And so that tells me that there's less water being required. Now, is that because you're anticipating less use of the RO membranes, which means that you get a higher efficiency, you don't lose 20% of it for brine? Can you give me a sense of what's driving that number down?
Again, this is just a budget number that we try to target where in this case, it produces less pumping, less groundwater, which kind of offsets the budget number that you just referenced. In one regard, I'm adding more electrical costs due to pumping, and on the other side, I'm reducing some of the water costs due to raw water purchases. So it's kind of a balance, kind of a makeup of a little bit of everything to put the numbers together for the budget.
And so then another part of that equation has to do with the quality of water. I recall at our last meeting you mentioned that we were upwards of 100 or 1,000 TDS. I think it was at 80%, 80-20 split between United and Callegas. So how do you factor that into the budgetary process? Is there a target in terms of the quality of water that's to be delivered among all the members of this agency?
Not within the budget. It's either through membrane treatment or it's not. The TDS value there's no place in the budget for TDS value.
Okay, when we're in an actual RO operational mode, what is the TDS that we're delivering to our end users?
Probably around 550 when the RO membranes are in service.
Okay. And so when we're on a bypass situation, I know you're going to tell me it's variable depending on the blending that occurs.
Correct.
But is there a target that we're looking at in terms of minimum quality that's delivered to each one of the member agencies?
Not in a maximum use of United flow condition. There's no target for TDS. If we were to go into a blending scenario where we're significantly changing the blend ratio to say 50-50%, then the TDS values will change, but the cost will go significantly higher.
The reason I'm asking the question is that now for the past 2 years, 90% of the time we've been in a bypass, which means we're relying on blending only. And so our member agencies are kind of at the mercy of staff in terms of how that blend occurs and what is ultimately delivered. Is that a fair statement?
Partially fair. Staff does have the ability to adjust the flows based on operational need, but really the demand will be dictated by, or the blend will be dictated by the demand that occurs 16 hours a day that we're not at the plant.
So what I'm thinking, and I believe I've asked this question before, is that there's no formal policy what our target is. Now that we've had 2 years of virtually nonstop bypass mode operation, is it appropriate for this body to kind of define, looking at the dollars and cents and the quality of water, of what that blend mix should be? Has that been a discussion point in the past?
I don't think it's been a discussion point. during my tenure. Oh, I thought it was, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was told that we occasionally forget to do that.
I thought I had turned it on, I didn't. Thank you. I don't think we have ever considered it. It is an interesting question, and it would be reflected in the budget at that point. If we decided to change that blend, have a cap, then obviously it could get more expensive. And so I guess that's a good subject perhaps, but could be add to cost. It's not probably going to decrease cost. So that's what we're dealing
Well,
with.
it depends on your willingness to accept water that's brown or doesn't taste all that great,
I
but still is
agree.
drinkable.
And we sold this because we had high quality water initially. That's what really sold this whole project. And unfortunately, it's kind of wasted now.
But from a base perspective, what I expect is that United is going to put in iron and manganese removal for that lower aquifer, and so then the plant will operate. From a base perspective, from a quality standpoint, our tenants are not happy. The sediments are dropping out, they're getting brown water. And so, again, I restate, the base would like United to put that plant in.
Well, maybe we should put it on the agenda for a future discussion and decide whether we want to discuss that and make a decision, this board.
If I may, just.
Please.
Just so, you know, because you're asking this question, this item was brought up, not as the board is seated today, but in fiscal year 14-15, when the plant first went down due to the drought conditions, there was a discussion for which I produced a chart. Sherry, you know the chart that I'm referring to. That chart shows potential blending ratios and potential impacts to the cost of raw water purchases, not treatment costs, just a 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30 split between the two sources. I can certainly reproduce that document with full year data so that we can see what it would look like for a full year. Back in 14-15, the chart that I previously had done for the board, it had 7 months of actual runtime with the membranes in that fiscal year and 4 to 5 months of bypass. So at that time, it was just what would be the potential impact to the budget if we did a 50-50 split and made better quality water. What would it look like at the end of the fiscal year? And I believe that particular analysis showed a $650,000 increase in water cost just for that year, just to produce that blend for 4 to 5 months. So to do it for a full year, I can certainly redo that chart and come up with a target of the TDS, because the only way to really know what the TDS value is to do the water quality analysis. And depending on the blend, there's some variances between those sources of water, and there would be a variance in the source of the sample. So, but we can get some targets, we can get some estimated costs, and that can certainly be a discussion for this board.
Oh, I think that would be timely. We focused, or at least I do, on TDS, but we also hear the siltation index, and I don't know if that, I'm not sure what the appropriate benchmarks or measurements are for the tasteability or washability of water that's received at the end of the line. But I think it would be a fruitful discussion, and it would seem to me that we ought to start with, well, this is the quality, and these are the, whatever the measurements are, TDS, siltation, what have you, in an RO online circumstance. So that becomes kind of the benchmark, and then we go from there in terms of various blending options and the quality received and the cost to the each member agency. I just seems to me that would be, and I'm asking this because it seems that we're not likely to get back online anytime soon, or at least on a reliable basis. So I'm looking at it more of that this is the new norm, is a bypass operation. And so I think it's appropriate that our member agencies weigh in on what we're willing to pay for the quality received. So thank you very much for that suggestion. I don't know when that might be. My thinking is that we ought to move forward with the budget. After all, this is kind of a, you know, a work in progress, so to speak, and there's a lot of unknowns out there, so don't want to hold up the budget adoption, but I don't know how soon you might be able to come back with this information, but I think that it would be a good exercise. Please.
Yeah, a little bit earlier, we had a brief discussion of the take or pay provisions, and that's obviously pertinent to any discussion of blending scenarios.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're looking at modifying those provisions in some way. Is there any kind of calendar estimate how long that's going to take, or what we can get?
I'm actually pushing to meet with United. I pushed Friday, just last week, to have a meeting with the Assistant General Manager of United to discuss that very issue. We're looking forward to moving this forward. The City of Oxnard has also chimed in that they're in agreement with the proposed changes. So it's time for United, since it's their agreement, it's time for United, we feel that it's time for them to step up, finalize the draft language, and put it out for final comment. So I'm making a formal request to United to do that.
That would, you know, that would affect any discussion of charges, and we ought to know that before we do anything else, I would think.
Correct. And the chart that I was referencing that I could build does have a line item in that chart for take-or pay provision, and I can do one chart with and one chart without as a comparison.
You know, and certainly with the take or pay, the assumption is that the water quality is going to be there. So that's kind of the overarching, is that those that, you know, that provide the water will have that in order to run through our system. That was the assumption, I think. So we have to kind of consider that as well when you take it back to the group. One more question here. I know this is operating budget for 17-18. Is that July 1st that started? Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
And if I could clarify that, the reason why it's so late is the agreement that we tried to get approved through the OH pipeline agreement is driving the format of the budget. With the new provisions of the language, it will change the format of the budget that would require United to fund it, their budgeting operation in a different format. Since the agreement couldn't get agreed in time, United had to take it back to their board to revert back to the old format, which then they approved with new rates, and then they transferred the rates to us, and then we put it into the report, and then it's being presented to you this evening.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
And one more item regarding your request for the iron and manganese removal. That is part of the language agreement within the OH pipeline. If United will submit the final draft for 30-day or final comment and signatures, then the funding mechanism for that iron and manganese plant, if so desired by the stakeholders, could then be put in place and move forward with that project, because it's already been piloted, it already has a feasibility study, and they're just waiting for a commitment of the members to secure bonding for those projects.
Okay, I would like to offer the opportunity for your counterpart over at the Channel Islands Beach Services District. Are there any thoughts that you would like to share with the board before we begin to kind of wrap up things here?
I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chair. However, there's nothing really of significance that I would like to ask of the board or of staff. I guess the only thing I'll offer is that I appreciate the work that both Mr. Burrell and Mr. Hickox have done, and they've both been very forthcoming in giving our district staff adequate time to review the budget in its Excel format, which is helpful to me. And so, thank you.
Great, thank you. So with that, do I hear a motion for approval of the budget? I think that staff has an understanding of what our hope is, whether it's the next regular meeting or thereafter, to follow up on some of our questions. So I would entertain a motion for approval of the budget.
Move to approve the budget.
I've heard a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. That actually brings us to where I think we kind of ended up coming back, which was item 8, correct?
6.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6. So we still have some opportunity for board member comments and reports. Do I have any? Okay. Oh, please.
Sorry. I was at a base up north where I was part of the team that put an iron and manganese removal plant in place for groundwater, and we turned the worst water quality in Air Force to best, as stated by the wife of the Mission Support Group commander.
And what would it cost to have a pipeline from there to here? All right, well, I appreciate those sentiments. All right, so do we have any suggestions beyond what we've already talked about in terms of new business we want to have agendized? Okay. So even though I probably pulled this out of order, Mr. Hensley, I see you're the only individual that was here, maybe not at the beginning of the meeting, and I had open forum. I thought we'd provide that opportunity. So I'm going to provide another opportunity for open forum if you care to speak. All right, anybody else? Good. All right, with that, I will adjourn to our next regular meeting, which will be November 20th, here in the City Council chambers at 4 p.m.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.